Short Stories by Fyodor Dostoevsky, An Honest Thief. One morning, as I was getting ready to leave for work, Agrafena, my cook, washerwoman, and housekeeper, came into my room and, to my surprise, started a conversation. She had always been a quiet and simple person. For the past 6 years, the only words I'd heard from her were her daily question about dinner. So this was unusual. "I came to talk to you, sir," she said abruptly. "You should rent out the little room." "Which little room?" I asked. "The one by the kitchen, of course," she replied. "And why should I rent it out?" "Why? Because people rent out rooms, don't they?" "But who would want to rent it?" "Who would want it?" "A lodger, of course," she answered confidently. "But the room is too small for a bed. There's no space to move. Who could live there?" "Who said anything about living there? He just needs a place to sleep. He could sit in the window during the day." "In the window?" "Yes, in the window," she said, as if it were obvious. "The one in the passage. He could sit there and sew or do whatever work he has. He could even sit on a chair if he wanted. He has a chair and a table too. He has everything he needs." "And who is this person you're talking about?" "Oh, he's a good man, experienced. I'll cook for him, and I'll charge him 3 rubles a month for board and lodging." After much effort, I finally managed to get the full story from Agrafena. It turned out that an elderly man had convinced her to let him rent the kitchen, as a lodger and boarder. When Agrafena got an idea in her head, it was impossible to change her mind. If I didn't agree, I knew she'd give me no peace. She would sink into one of her moods, brooding and becoming deeply unhappy for weeks. During those times, my dinners would be ruined, my clothes misplaced, and the house left uncleaned. I'd noticed long ago that she wasn't capable of coming up with ideas on her own, but once someone planted an idea in her mind, not allowing her to carry it out felt like committing a great injustice against her. Since I valued my peace of mind more than anything, I agreed. "Does he have a passport or some kind of paperwork?" I asked. "Of course he does. He's a good man, an experienced man, and he promised to pay 3 rubles, she said. The very next day, the new lodger moved into my modest bachelor apartment. Surprisingly, I wasn't bothered by this. In fact, I was secretly pleased. I usually led a very lonely, hermit-like life. I had almost no friends, and I rarely went out. After 10 years of living this way, I had grown used to solitude. But when I thought about spending another 10 or 15 years in the same isolation, with only Agrafena and these same bachelor quarters, it felt like a bleak prospect. So, having a new tenant, as long as he behaved himself, felt like a blessing. Agrafena was right. My lodger, Astafy Ivanovich, was indeed a man of experience. His passport showed that he was a retired soldier, something I could have guessed just by looking at him. An old soldier is easy to recognize. Astafy Ivanovich was a good example of his kind, and we got along very well. The best part was that he sometimes told stories about his life, and in the monotony of my days, his storytelling was a real treasure. One of his stories made a deep impression on me, and here's what led to it. One day, I was alone in the apartment. Both Astafy and Agrafena were out on errands. Suddenly, I heard someone enter from the inner room. I thought it might be a stranger. When I went to check, there really was a short man standing in the passage without an overcoat, even though it was a chilly autumn day. "What do you want?" I asked. "Does a clerk named Alexandrov live here?" "There's no one by that name here," I replied. "Goodbye." But the dvornik told me it was here. He said, cautiously moving toward the door. "Get out, brother, move along," I told him, and he left. The next day, after lunch, while Astafy was fitting a coat he was altering for me, someone came into the passage again. I opened the door just a little and saw the same visitor from the day before. Calm as could be, he grabbed my quilted greatcoat from the peg, stuffed it under his arm, and bolted out of the apartment. Agrafena just stood there, staring at him in shock, without lifting a finger to stop him. Astafy immediately ran after the thief, but returned 10 minutes later, out of breath and empty-handed. The man had completely disappeared. "Well, that's some bad luck, Astafy Ivanovich," I said. "It's a good thing he didn't take your cloak too, or you'd be in real trouble." The whole event left such a strong impression on Astafy Ivanovich that I soon forgot about the theft and became more interested in watching him. He couldn't let it go. Every few minutes, he'd stop whatever he was doing and recount the entire incident again. How he'd been standing there, how the thief had taken the coat right in front of him, and how he hadn't managed to catch the man. Then he'd go back to his work, only to stop again and start retelling the story. Eventually, he went downstairs to the dvornik to give him a piece of his mind for letting something like this happen. Then he came back and started scolding Agrafena for not acting. Finally, he returned to his work, but even hours later, he was still muttering to himself, replaying the scene over and over in his mind. How the coat had been taken, how he'd been standing there, how I had been here, and how the thief had gotten away right under our noses. Astafy knew his business well, but he was a terrible slowpoke and a bit of a busybody. "He really made fools of us, Astafy Ivanovitch," I said that evening as I handed him a glass of tea. I was trying to pass the time by bringing up the story again. His repeated retelling, combined with the seriousness he gave it, had started to become quite entertaining. "Fools indeed, sir. Even though it's not my coat that was stolen, it makes me angry. A thief is the worst kind of vermin. If someone takes something you can spare, that's one thing. But a thief steals the work of your hands, the sweat of your brow, your time. Ugh, it's disgusting. I can't even talk about it without feeling upset. How can you not be bothered by losing your property, sir?" "You're right, Astafy Ivanovitch. It would have been better if the coat had just been burned. It's frustrating to let a thief have it. It's unpleasant." "Unpleasant? I should think so. But still, there are different kinds of thieves. You know, sir, I once came across an honest thief." "An honest thief? How can a thief be honest, Astafy Ivanovitch?" "Well, you're right, sir. A thief can't really be honest. What I meant is that he was an honest man in general, but he still ended up stealing. I actually felt sorry for him." "Why was that, Astafy Ivanovitch?" "It happened about 2 years ago. I'd been out of work for almost a year, and just before I lost my job, I met this poor lost soul. We got to know each other at a tavern. He was a drunk, a vagrant, a beggar. He used to have some kind of job, but his drinking habits cost him everything. He was such a hopeless case. God only knows what he had on. It was hard to tell if he even had a shirt under his coat. He drank away everything he could get his hands on. But he wasn't the type to argue or cause trouble. He was quiet, soft-spoken, and good-natured. He was so ashamed to ask for anything, but you could see it in his eyes when he wanted a drink. So you'd buy him one. That's how we became friends. Or rather, he just latched onto me. I didn't mind. He was like a little dog, following me everywhere I went, even after just one meeting. He was so thin, he looked like a wisp of thread. At first, he just asked if he could stay the night, and I let him. I even looked at his passport. Everything seemed in order. The next day, it was the same story. Then, on the third day, he came back again, sat in the window all day, and stayed the night. That's when I started thinking, he's attached himself to me. Now I have to feed him, give him drink, and let him sleep here. I'm barely making ends meet myself, and now I have someone else to take care of. Before he came to me, he used to do the same thing at a clerk's place. They'd drink together all the time. But that poor clerk eventually drank himself to death. My man's name was Emelyan Ilyich. I didn't know what to do with him. I felt too ashamed to kick him out. He was such a pitiful, God-forsaken creature. I'd never seen anyone like him. He didn't ask for anything either. He'd just sit there looking at me like a dog. It was heartbreaking to see how far drinking had brought him down. I kept wondering how I could tell him, "You need to leave, Emelyanushka. You've come to the wrong place. I can barely feed myself, let alone take care of you." I could picture how he'd react. He'd sit there staring at me, not understanding what I was saying. Then, when it finally sank in, he'd get up, take his little bundle, this red-checked handkerchief full of holes with God knows what inside, and try to adjust his shabby old coat so it would look decent and keep him warm. He was a man with delicate feelings, you know. Then he'd open the door and leave, tears in his eyes. No, I couldn't do it. I couldn't let him go like that. You just feel sorry for someone like that. And then I started thinking about my own situation. Wait a bit, Emelianushka, I said to myself. You won't be staying with me much longer. I'll soon be moving and you won't be able to find me then. Well, sir, my employer, Alexander Filimonovich, who has since passed away, God rest his soul, told me, I'm very pleased with you, Astafy Ivanovich. When we come back from the country, we'll hire you again. I had been working as their butler and he was a kind gentleman, but he passed away later that same year. So after I saw him off, I took what little money I had and decided to take a break. I rented a corner in the room of an old woman I knew. She had once been a nurse and now lived off a small pension. Goodbye, Emelianushka, I thought to myself. You won't be able to track me down here. But what do you think happened? One evening after I'd gone out to visit someone and returned, the first thing I saw was Emelianushka sitting on my box with his ragged little bundle beside him. He was in his tattered coat waiting for me. To pass the time, he'd borrowed a church book from the old woman and was holding it upside down. He had sniffed me out. My heart sank. Well, I thought, there's no getting rid of him now. I should have turned him away in the beginning. So I asked him right away, Did you bring your passport, Emelianushka? I sat down and started thinking. How much trouble could this vagabond really cause me? I figured it wouldn't be much. I'd give him some bread in the morning, maybe an onion to help it go down. At midday, more bread and another onion, and in the evening, bread, onion, and kvass. If we happened to come across some cabbage soup, we'd both be satisfied. I don't eat much myself, and everyone knows a drunkard doesn't care about food, just vodka or some herb brandy. He'll ruin me with his drinking, I thought, but then another idea struck me and it really took hold. I started feeling like I wouldn't have anything to live for if Emelianushka left. I made up my mind to take care of him, to save him from himself. I'll wean him off the bottle, I decided. You just wait, Emelianushka. You can stay, but you'll have to behave. You'll follow my rules. I thought I'd start by giving him a small job to do, but not right away. First, I wanted him to relax a little. I'll find something you can handle, Emelianushka, I told myself. After all, every job requires a certain skill. So I began to keep an eye on him. It didn't take long to see he was a hopeless case. I tried talking to him. I gave him advice. Emelianushka, I said, it's time to clean up your act. Stop drinking. Look at the state of your clothes. That coat of yours is so full of holes it might as well be a sieve. You've got to draw the line somewhere. He'd sit and listen to me with his head down. Would you believe it, sir? He was so ruined by drink, he could hardly string a sentence together. Talk to him about cucumbers, and he'd answer with something about beans. He'd sigh deeply after listening to me. Why are you sighing, Emelian Ilyich? I asked. Oh, nothing, Astafy Ivanovich. Don't mind me. Did you know there were 2 women fighting in the street today? One accidentally knocked over the other's basket of cranberries. And what of it? Well, the second woman knocked over her cranberries on purpose and stomped on them. And what's so important about that, Emelian Ilyich? Oh, nothing. I just thought I'd mention it. Just thought you'd mention it, I thought to myself. You've drunk away your wits, Emelianushka. Another time, he said, Did you hear about the gentleman who dropped a money note in Gorokovaya Street? Or maybe it was Sadovaya. A peasant picked it up and claimed it was his, but another man saw it first and said it was his. They fought over it until a policeman came, took the note, and gave it back to the gentleman. And what of that, Emelianushka? Nothing much. Folks laughed. Astafy Ivanovich. Ah, Emelianushka, what do folks matter? You've thrown your life away for nothing. Listen to me, Emelian Ilyich. Get a job. Have some mercy on yourself. What kind of job could I do, Astafy Ivanovich? No one will hire me. That's why you're in this mess, Emelianushka, because of your drinking. Yet he'd keep dodging responsibility. And if I got angry, he'd grab his old coat, slip out, and be gone all day, only to return at night drunk. Where he got the money for his drinking, I have no idea. It certainly wasn't from me. No, Emelian Ilyich, I said, You'll end up in a bad place if you keep this up. Stop drinking, hear me, give it up. And let me warn you, next time you come home drunk, you'll sleep on the stairs. I won't let you in. Hearing my threat, Emelianushka stayed home that day and the next. But on the third day, he disappeared again. I waited and waited, but he didn't return. I admit, I felt a mix of fear and pity. What had I done to him? Had I scared him away? Where could he have gone now? He might get lost or worse. Lord, have mercy on him, I prayed. When night fell and he still hadn't returned, I became even more anxious. The next morning, I went out to the porch, and there he was, lying on the steps, his head resting on the cold stone, frozen to the bone. What on earth are you doing, Emelianushka? I exclaimed. God have mercy on you. What's going to happen to you now? He looked up at me with those weary, sad eyes of his and replied softly, You were angry with me the other day, Astafy Ivanovich. You said I'd have to sleep in the porch, so I didn't dare come inside. I thought it was better to stay out here. His words cut me deeply. I felt both anger and sorrow. Surely, Emelianushka, I said with frustration, you could find something better to do than lie here guarding the steps like this? What else can I do, Astafy Ivanovich? He asked simply, his voice almost resigned. Look at the state of your coat, I said, unable to hold back my irritation. It's already in tatters, and now you're sweeping the stairs with it. Couldn't you at least sew up the holes as any decent man would? Pick up a needle and fix it. To my surprise, he actually tried. Of course, I had said it as a joke, but he seemed so shaken by my scolding that he immediately set to work. He took off his coat and tried to thread a needle. It was painful to watch. His hands were trembling, and his red, swollen eyes squinted as he struggled to get the thread through the eye of the needle. He wet the thread, twisted it, and tried again and again, but it was no use. Finally, he gave up and looked at me helplessly. Well, I said, what am I supposed to do with you? If anyone saw this, I wouldn't know where to hide my face. Stop this nonsense, Emelianushka. Sit quietly and don't make a spectacle of yourself. Don't sleep on the stairs and embarrass me like this. But what am I to do, Astafy Ivanovich? He said, his voice trembling. I know I'm a drunkard, a worthless man. All I do is trouble you, my benefactor. And with that, his lips began to quiver, and a single tear rolled down his pale, stubbly cheek. Suddenly he broke into sobs. The sight of him crying like that struck me like a knife to the heart. I had never imagined such sensitivity in him. I had thought he was beyond feeling, that he was too far gone. At that moment, I felt a wave of despair. No, Emelianushka, I thought, I can't keep you here. You're hopeless. Go your way and let it be. But life went on, and soon after, an incident occurred that I'll never forget. I had a pair of fine riding breeches, blue with a check pattern. They had been custom made for a gentleman from the country, but he decided they weren't full enough and refused to take them. I figured I could sell them to a second-hand dealer for 5 rubles or repurpose them into 2 pairs of trousers and a waistcoat. Every little bit counts when you're living hand to mouth. Around this time, Emelianushka seemed to be changing. He wasn't drinking, not a drop, and spent his days sitting quietly, lost in thought. It was as though he was turning over a new leaf. I dared to hope that perhaps he had finally come to his senses. Then, one holiday, I went to Vespers. When I returned, I found Emelianushka sitting by the window, rocking back and forth. He was drunk. So, that's what you've been up to, I thought. Feeling uneasy, I went to my chest to check on my belongings. The riding breeches were gone. I searched high and low, but they were nowhere to be found. A cold fear gripped me. I questioned the old woman we were living with, but she swore she hadn't touched them. Who else could it be? I asked. Who's been in here? No one, she insisted. Emelyan Ilyich went out and came back. Ask him. I turned to Emelianushka, still rocking in his seat. Did you take the riding breeches, Emelianushka? You know, the ones I made for the gentleman from the country? He looked at me with wide, glassy eyes. No, Astafy Ivanovich, he said. I didn't, touch them. But something about the way he said it, The way he avoided my gaze made my heart sink. Still, I couldn't bring myself to accuse him outright. What had become of those breeches? Where could they have gone? No, Astafy Ivanovitch, he said quietly. I've never seen them. Never seen them? I replied. So what are you saying, Emelian Ilyich? That they've simply gotten up and walked off on their own? Maybe they have, he muttered, avoiding my eyes. When I heard that, a wave of anger washed over me. I got up immediately, went to light the lamp, and sat down to work on a waistcoat I was altering for a clerk who lived below us. But the rage and ache in my chest wouldn't subside. It was as if I had thrown all my belongings into a fire. Yet somehow, I could feel Emelianushka sensing my anger. A guilty man, they say, can sense trouble before it strikes, like a bird feels a coming storm. Do you know, Astafy Ivanovitch? He started hesitantly, his voice trembling. Antip Prohorich, the apothecary, married the coachman's widow this morning. She's the one who... I cut him off with a sharp look. He got the message. Silently, he rose from his spot, shuffled over to the bed, and began rummaging around under it. He muttered to himself, No, not here. Where on earth have they gone? I watched him for a while, waiting to see what he would do next. He stayed busy, crawling under the bed on all fours. Finally, I couldn't bear it any longer. What are you doing under there, Emelian Ilyich? I asked coldly. Looking for the breeches, Astafy Ivanovitch, he replied earnestly. Maybe they fell under the bed somewhere. You've no need to go crawling about for me, a poor, simple man like myself, I said, my frustration boiling over. What are you trying to prove by this nonsense? Oh, it's nothing, he said softly. I'll just keep looking. Maybe they'll turn up somewhere. I stood there, staring at him as he continued his fruitless search. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer. Emelian Ilyich, I said firmly, have you simply stolen them from me? Is this how you repay the bread and salt you've eaten in my home? At that he froze, still lying on his stomach under the bed. He didn't answer for a long time. When he finally crept out, his face was as pale as a sheet. He sat down near the window and stared into the distance, silent for what felt like hours. No, Astafy Ivanovitch, he finally said, his voice shaking. He stood and came toward me, his entire body trembling. No, I swear I never touched your breeches. His hands shook as he pointed to his own chest, as if trying to affirm his honesty, but his words wavered so much that I felt a pang of fear. He looked so pitiful I was rooted to the spot. Well, Emelian Ilyich, I said at last, trying to calm myself, if that's how it is, then forgive me. Maybe I was wrong to accuse you. Forget the breeches, let them go, we'll get by without them. Thank God we still have our hands to work and earn our bread. There's no need to resort to thieving. He listened to me, standing there with an expression of deep sorrow. Then, slowly, he sat back down in the same spot near the window. He stayed there unmoving for the rest of the evening. When I finally lay down to sleep, he still hadn't moved. In the morning, I found him curled up on the bare floor, wrapped in his old coat. He hadn't even bothered to come to bed. From that day on, something changed between us. I couldn't feel the same toward him anymore. At first, I even hated him. It was as though my own son had betrayed me. I couldn't shake the feeling of loss and disappointment. Meanwhile, Emelianushka sank deeper into his misery. For 2 whole weeks, he drank himself into oblivion, coming home late at night, stumbling and drunk. He didn't say a single word during that time. It was as if he was punishing himself, letting his grief and shame eat away at him. When his drinking finally stopped, he sat by the window in silence for 3 days straight. On the 3rd day, I noticed tears streaming down his face. He wasn't making a sound, just sitting there, crying like a child. Seeing him like that broke my heart. What's wrong, Emelianushka? I asked softly, breaking the silence for the first time since that awful day. He began trembling all over. Nothing, Astafy Ivanovitch, he said, his voice barely audible. Come now, I said gently. Don't carry on like this. What's done is done. Let it go. Oh, it's nothing, he replied. I need to find some work, Astafy Ivanovich." "What kind of work?" I asked. "Anything," he said. "Maybe I can find a job like I had before. I don't want to be a burden on you anymore, Astafy Ivanovich. I'll pay you back every bit of what I owe you and make up for all the kindness you've shown me." "Let bygones be bygones, Emelianushka," I said, trying to comfort him. "Stay here. We'll manage just like we did before." But he shook his head. "No, Astafy Ivanovich, I can't stay. You've been locking up your chest ever since. It makes me feel terrible. I can't bear it anymore." "Where will you go?" I asked, alarmed. "You'll be lost out there, like a child without a home." "I have to go," he insisted. Tears welled up in his eyes again. "Forgive me for all the trouble I've caused. I can't stay here any longer." And just like that, he left. For days I waited for him to return. Each night I hoped he would come back, but he didn't. By the fourth day I couldn't bear it any longer. I went out looking for him, checking every tavern and corner of the city. But there was no sign of him. On the fifth day, just as I was losing all hope, the door creaked open. There he was, my Emelianushka. He looked thinner than ever, his face blue with cold and his hair matted with dirt. He sat down silently on the chest, too weary to speak. Seeing him like that filled me with both relief and sadness. I began to care for him again, speaking gently and trying to lift his spirits. I couldn't abandon him, no matter what. "Well, Emelianushka," I said gently, "I'm glad you've come back. Had you stayed away much longer, I'd have had to go looking for you in the taverns again today. Are you hungry?" "No, Astafy Ivanovich," he murmured. "Come now, aren't you really? There's no point hiding it. Look, there's some cabbage soup left from yesterday. It even has meat in it. It's good stuff. And here's some bread and an onion to go with it. Come on, eat up. It'll do you good." I made him eat, and as I watched him, I realized just how hungry he was. The poor man devoured the food like a starving wolf. It struck me that he hadn't eaten in days, and the thought broke my heart. He hadn't returned out of pride or a sense of guilt. He had come back because hunger had driven him to it. Seeing his desperation, I couldn't stay angry. My heart softened, and I decided to make peace with him. Let me run to the tavern, I thought. I'll get him something to lift his spirits, and we'll put this behind us. I can't stay mad at you, Emelianushka. When I returned, I had a bottle of vodka in hand. "Here, Emelian Ilyich," I said, pouring him a glass. "Let's have a drink to mark the holiday. It'll do you good." He reached for the glass eagerly, but hesitated just as his fingers brushed it. His hand wavered, and I could see him wrestling with himself. A moment later, he lifted the glass to his lips, but paused again, then set it back down on the table. "What's the matter, Emelianushka?" I asked, puzzled. "Nothing, Astafy Ivanovich," he said, his voice low and trembling. I'm not going to drink anymore, Astafy Ivanovich." "Do you mean you've given it up for good, or is it just for today?" I asked, surprised. He didn't answer. Instead, he rested his head on his hand, looking worn and distant. "Are you feeling ill, Emelianushka?" I pressed, concerned. "Yes, Astafy Ivanovich," he replied softly. "I don't feel well." I helped him to the bed and laid him down. His forehead was burning hot and he shivered uncontrollably. I sat by his side all day, watching over him as his fever worsened. Toward evening, he seemed weaker still. Desperate to help, I mixed him a simple meal: oil, onion, kvass, and bread. But he shook his head. "No, Astafy Ivanovich," he whispered. "I don't want anything to eat today." I even made him tea, fumbling around the kitchen in a panic, but it didn't help. On the third morning, I decided to fetch a doctor I knew, a man named Kostopravov, who had treated me before. When he came, he examined Emelianushka briefly and shook his head. "He's in a bad way," the doctor said. "There's little I can do now, but I'll leave you a powder if you want to try." I didn't bother with the powder. It felt futile. By the fifth day, Emelianushka was clearly dying. He lay there, frail and pale, as I sat by the window, pretending to work. The old woman who lived nearby was heating the stove, and the room was silent, heavy with sorrow. My heart ached as I watched him. He looked at me several times, his eyes filled with a deep, unspoken misery. But each time I met his gaze, he quickly looked away. "Astafi Ivanovich," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "What is it, Emelianushka?" I asked, leaning closer. "If you took my coat to a second-hand dealer," he began hesitantly, "how much do you think they'd give you for it?" "Perhaps a ruble," I said, though I knew no one would pay that much for the tattered old thing. He was silent for a moment, then added, "I was thinking, Astafi Ivanovich, that they might give you 3 rubles for it. It's made of cloth, after all." "Maybe," I replied gently. "If you ask for 3 rubles, they might give it to you." He nodded, falling silent again. An hour passed before he spoke once more. "Astafi Ivanovich," he said. "Yes, Emelianushka?" "When I die," he said slowly, "sell my coat. Don't bury me in it. It might still be useful to someone." His words hit me like a blow, and I had to look away to hide my tears. I couldn't bear to see him like this, so resigned to his fate. An hour later he asked for water. I brought him a cup, and he drank slowly. "Thank you, Astafi Ivanovich," he said, his voice weaker than before. "Is there anything else you need?" I asked. He hesitated. "No, Astafi Ivanovich, but those riding breeches, it was me, I took them." "God forgive you, Emelianushka," I said, my voice breaking. "Depart in peace, you sorrowful soul." He tried to say more, his lips trembling as he struggled to sit up. His face turned red, then suddenly white as snow. His head fell back, and with one final breath, he was gone.